Back to the Failing Upward Club. This is a space to reflect on the tough lessons from failure, working out how to improve and not repeat the same things the next time around. Danny, welcome back to another episode.
It's nice to be here, Mike. Well, you didn't even say who you were. Maybe this is the first time someone's listening along. They don't even know who you are. You
I'm
do
Michael.
That same thing. Say I'm Michael Bridgman.
Bridgman. I forgot that. All right, I'll bring that in next time. We're 8 episodes in and we are yet to get an intro correct. So this is all part of, if you are a first-time listener, this is all part of the shtick here at the Failing Upward Club. Danny, let's cut straight to the chase, straight to the point. We're talking about people today, all things hiring, firing, growing a team from our time building data code. So as we typically do, we start with kind of the headlines up front, just to give everyone a bit of a lay of the land of what to expect as we go through the next half an hour or so. So what we're going to cover today, start with the tough stuff first, and it's really around the times that we've had to kind of let people go from the business that we were building. And really the key lesson here being that kind of alignment is sort of more important, or really what you're kind of trying to optimize for: alignment to the specific role, alignment to the requirements, alignment to the fit at the point in time. And whenever you do, or whenever we've had to let people go or move in a different direction, really, it's always hard, but what we learned is that it's really not a reflection of that person's worth in any way, but it's really just that at that point in time, there was not the right alignment or fit to the business and what we needed to help grow the company. Next, moving on, talking around hiring the right people. And really, in an early stage company, there's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of kind of gray space. So actually trying to test for people's comfort in or operating in and around ambiguity and building that into kind of some of the hiring filters wherever you can. Another one on the hiring, whilst hiring for ambiguity or confident in and around ambiguity is important. The other one that we learned, and I don't think this is really a surprise, but probably it's just giving some of our own reflection on, the importance for hiring for values. Skills, like hard skills, people have them or they don't, and you can kind of teach people to upskill, or if they're curious, people will naturally upskill as their role changes within an organization. But the values of that human, the way they show up for work, the way they represent your business, and the way they kind of, as is important in a startup, the way they jump into the trenches when the stuff gets really tricky, are all the things that you really can't teach. They've either got it or they don't. And finally, whilst we're going to have a future episode on ownership and all things kind of fundraising and what have you, as it particularly relates to the people and our business and learnings, that having a big four bank as a strategic backer is awesome. They give you money and they give you an enormous amount of credibility, but some of the downsides to that is some rigidity in the way that funding and the way the business model has to be created, or the way the business is created. And ultimately what we learned there was that was quite restrictive in many ways as it related to hiring. Our inability to create ESOPs and our inability to flex RAM and these type of things when we needed it most was a quite severe handicap towards the end of our business. So that's what I'm thinking we're going to go through today, Danny. Anything on the people side maybe that we haven't covered that you think might be worthwhile?
No, plenty on the people side, Mike. I think that's a good starting point. People is one of those topics you can talk about for a long, long time. Again, it's like so many of these things aren't necessarily new lessons for us. It's not like we're the first ones who ever come across this. And there's so many of these things which are very textbook that you hear. And I think part of this comes to the lessons of many parts of a business, where it's not until you go through the process or you put in the situation that you realize the generic lesson, like the whole hiring for values or like alignment, all of these things. It's not until you're really in the situation where there's a harder call to make that you're like, oh, fuck, that's what it really means. And I think people was one of those cases that there's a few different times where it just, I don't know, you get to the point where you're like, oh, this doesn't quite work, and you have to go down some harder conversations and some harder paths. I think what we generally found is, like, we always had a very, like, everyone always has a really good focus on, well, not everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, but like, I feel a lot of people have a good focus on people. Everyone says their team is full of rock stars and Everyone says that they've got the best people, and to a certain extent, you've kind of got to believe that you do have that kind of team. And if you don't, then you definitely don't have the right people. But the reality is, there's always there's so many people out there in the market that it is important to have a very open mind around, is this the right person for the right role and to the right stage of the business? And I think it's worth just going through a couple of those examples, and again, reflecting on some of the things that happened with us, and when there was the right person or it wasn't the right person, and what that actually meant. So, maybe let's start with some of the times there wasn't the right people. And again, we don't have to go into the specifics, and we're not trying to name and shame people here. And I think the important point you said is everyone who ever worked for Dataco and was with Dataco for some point of the business journey, I feel I personally like all of those people. We didn't have any just pure bad eggs in the business. There was no one who came in and we were just what the hell, this person is crazy, or we're just totally misaligned. And to a large extent, I think you've done something wrong if you get to a point where you do have that. Somewhere, I think people get that maybe when they get too big or when they get bigger, because it just gets harder to monitor all of the people coming through, and you can't personally vet everyone and know what they're like. But I think everyone that we had involved with the business were people that we kind of knew through the networks, or we found them just randomly through a LinkedIn application. When we went through that process of interviewing them and bringing them in, they were all awesome people at the core. There was just some of those people where the timing just didn't quite align. And this goes all the way back in the early days. Worked with an engineer in the business, say, who, again, I don't want to name people who are listening. If they are those people, they'll know exactly who we're talking about. But this engineer was a fucking awesome engineer. He's a great engineer. He's a really good guy in general as well. And I think the majority of the team got along with him. But what the situation was actually where he was in his career, he was ready to take more of a next step and have a bigger role in terms of a leadership role, and he was ready to manage a team, and he was ready to do all that. And we were just so early on the journey that we didn't have a team for him to manage. And we had someone more senior than him who was going to be more of that lead role. And there was a little bit of friction in the team with someone else where the personalities didn't quite clash. And at the end of the day, where it got to was it just wasn't the best situation for everyone. It wasn't the right role for him. It wasn't probably the right fit for us because of what we needed in that role at that point in time. And we nearly came to this mutual understanding that he was going to go down a different path, which was an awesome path for him as well. He did, absolutely made the right choice going down that way, and for us to part ways. But it was that recognition to say, despite him being a fucking red hot engineer and a guy we get along with, it's just not the right fit. And I think that's where you've got to be able to, in business, take it away from the personality and whether you like the person, and just being really honest about where it is. Because I think people who stay in roles that aren't right for them, that don't have the space for them to grow, that has the path that they need, they can resent that if you try to hold on to them in the wrong way. So I think there was a few different examples of that through our business, but it's kind of having that open mind around what you actually need at what point in time.
Yeah, and I think a part of that, Danny, and again, kind of probably looking in from the outside a little bit there, this was literally kind of day one of the business. It was the initial choices about what was going to be built and how it was going to be built, the really fundamental languages that were going to be used, architecture that was going to be used. It's the stuff at that point in time I knew nothing about. It's the stuff I probably still don't know as much as anyone else in our team about. But it's what I boil that down to is, there was decisions being made around that were based on kind of taste and ethos. And ultimately, we had three very senior technical people, including one, that kind of had different tastes, if you will, or different backgrounds, different ethos around how they would create and develop. And ultimately, not all of those kind of viewpoints could be considered, or we really had to pick a winner. And at that point of the business, no one knew if that was going to be the right decision or not, right? But it's literally we have to choose a direction and we have to go down that path. And everyone has to commit. It's like we're going to have the discussion up front, but once we decide, we're all committing. And fundamentally, I feel like the right thing to do when we chose the path forward was to say, like, hey, potentially that's not the pathway you were prescribing, and we understand that that's probably going to cause some like discomfort ultimately, or you're not going to be comfortable with that decision. So that was, from my perspective, like another part of it. And I think when you're early on in business, it's just like they're those decisions you have to make. And to your point, there was no judgment on like the value or the worth of that, and who knows, it may not have still been the wrong decision, but it's like at the end of the day, you've got to make these pretty tough decisions. It's like we're going in a particular direction. There's some other opportunities, as you said, like to build leadership, to manage teams. We didn't have a team then. We just had a couple of senior people who were going to go and do exceptional work and build the company. So yeah, that's just like a bit of extra context there, where I think sometimes it's not a right or a wrong decision, but you're going to go a particular way and other things have to fall into place as well.
No, exactly right. And I think we saw other examples as we went through the journey where we like our approach was small and senior, really. Like we were, particularly because of the domain we we're playing in, we weren't trying to grow and have a ton of grads and have this, like, we were like, keep a small team for as long as we can.
Yeah.
Keep them, like, have relatively senior people who've done this before and bring the experience. And there was a stage where we had too many people who were too senior. And from a go-to-market perspective in particular, like, again, it just didn't quite align to the roles or the type of roles that all of those senior people needed to do. And again, we ended up going in a different direction with one of those people, even though they were awesome. And there's someone who's still, like, I catch up with them like regularly. And the value as an individual and a human, both in terms of how we like them and the contribution they can make for the business, was like there. But if you got too many of those people, it's like you can over-index in having that skill, and you need like a different balance, or you need some more people who are the executors. Like there's always this fine line in terms of exactly what we need to do in terms of selling, or who you need from a skill set perspective, and not over indexing. And then, like, similarly, as we went along the path, we got to a point where even when we said, oh, we need more doers in the sales perspective rather than the senior people, we still maybe we had another person come on the go-to-market function, and we just weren't quite at that purely scalable go-to-market motion yet. Like, it was still getting to real product market fit, and we had them in probably slightly too early, and like we weren't ready to say, come in and take the sales engine and just go for it. And we were all very heavily in this like founder-led sales journey at that point in time, that we needed to still craft that before opening up for them. And they're kind of coming into a role that's not, they don't have the autonomy. It's not like you go and just run sales. We're all still very involved, and they can't just run hard in terms of going and just picking up the phone or doing massive outreach. So again, it wasn't a personality thing. There was a little bit about the nature of the role and the skills we needed at that time, and it just didn't quite align.
Yeah, and I think where we did, like, there is a lesson in, I think, probably more time in getting super clear on what role you're hiring for and why, but also then that extra layer of not leaving anything unsaid. I think you mentioned a senior hire earlier. I think there was assumptions that were being made on our side and their side around what requirements might look like and where real value can be created. And ultimately, at the end of the day, my sense or my feeling was that those assumptions weren't aligned, and actually they were never aligned. I think that extra clarity up front and explicit conversations around what's required and when it's required and what this looks like today and over time becomes critically important. And where I think that is tricky, and where I think a lot of businesses will probably run into this, or others might be running into this, is like the whole concept of fractional executives is great, right? But I think potentially, we were in this mode of like hiring some fractional executives is how I'd kind of look at it. It's very like analogous to that. And a fractional executive will do what they're going to tell you to do in the time frame they've allotted, right? And especially if they're working across multiple businesses. But you should also then expect that they may not go and then throw a sales hat on and go and like walk the floor and like whatever it is. I think you've got to be very clear around like the pure founder led, wear many hats, do many things, do anything that's required, versus a very specific like fractional hire. Like they're not the same things, and you can't, and just because they've got experience and just because they've got a brand doesn't mean they're ultimately then just going to become a person they never said they were going to become for your business.
No, exactly. And there's a few points, 2 points that you actually raised at the start where this becomes important too. One is to do with the ambiguity of like when those ambiguity, like when the role of the person who can deal with the ambiguity and what this kind of cross space looks like is important and where that creates value. That's kind of one point I'll come to in a second. And the second one is to do with the alignment of what the end state reward and value is. And the truth is, if people are just coming in as these fractional executives and it's just like it's a day rate, there's something there, there's not really the buy-in to do any more. This is where we won't go all the way into the conversation. We can go into that somewhere in the structure as well. But this like people having skin in the game in these early stage companies becomes important for them going above and beyond, because they want to get to the outsized rewards of working with a startup. And most of the time a startup doesn't have the funds to pay them crazy amounts of money anyway. And there's like equity itself becomes a whole other topic, and people have got points of view in terms of don't give it to anyone and hold as much yourself. But like this aligning people to the same incentive structure and having them incentive in the long-term sustainable growth of a business becomes critically important to how people react, what they put into the business, what they do day to day. So I think there's a few things there, but maybe coming back to the ambiguity, I think where I'd say it felt like we got it right in terms of the people, and where I think there's sometimes exceptions to the rule in this space, and this is where it gets hard to do it, but it's like the people, we nearly had this view of like the cross-functional unicorns. It was like when we came across cross-functional unicorns, typically we were like, let's find a way to make this work. And I think this is a hard thing early on in the journey, because I do believe creating a good business is about pulling together a great group of people who will all contribute their own unique value. And sometimes that's a risk. Like sometimes it's about coming across someone and you're like, I can see you creating immense value in this business in a few different ways, and we're nearly going to architect a role for you to come into this. And it may be a risk to take on those people too early because you start to increase your burn. But if you get it right, those people supercharge your business. And so for us, and this is where we can, I think I'm fine to name a couple of names here, but like one of them was, say, Hannah. Hannah came into our business. We had worked with Hannah on the client side, and she was this like a unicorn in terms of she used to work as a lawyer, so was like legal counsel within an organization, who worked in the data space, by the way, as well, and then transitioned to this partnerships commercial role. So it's like someone who you're hiring in a commercial standpoint, but was a lawyer, is just like, it just means the hats that she can wear and being able to not have to go and pinch hit and go and pay whatever the ridiculous fees are to engage a lawyer at that point in time. You don't have enough money to have a full-time internal counsel. But having someone who does have that background and can kind of pull you into that, I think just has so much more flexibility. If you add in then some kind of mindset where they're fine to deal with ambiguity, then that's the type of people you're like, you're going to create huge value for our business. Let's find a way of bringing you in. Yeah. And I think those unicorn kind of multi-roles are where you can get outsized returns. It's like an investment kind of strategy, right? You can get outsized returns. It's not just the stable horse that you know is just, they're a good engineer and they're going to do some engineering and know they're pretty set. There's those ones you're like, I feel this is a good bet for us to make, because what they can then generate for us could be something that's just completely unique and different to what we'd be able to do without them.
Yeah, and I think the key lesson there, Danny, we spoke about it on the partnership episode a couple of weeks ago, but it was, like always be kind of building the relationships. And I think the other one that's critically important in this space is you sort of always hiring, like even when you're not, you are. And in that particular example, I'd spotted that Hannah had moved on from a previous role, and we had a conversation around like, hey, you guys should try and catch up in Sydney. I think you had a beer, and then I think not long after that, Hannah was on our team.
You said it was your idea, Mike. You were
I
the
spotted.
genesis.
I will lay the claim to I spotted the departure. I think because I think I was in email communication. I was getting no
You were
emails in return. I thought she was just off me, but she had left the business. So that was
you were
that.
pretty good at spotting those. Actually, it's one of those good superpowers you do have, Mike. Actually, you're pretty good at picking up on some of those industry movements of people, and the amount of time you ping me and were like, "This person's here" or "This has happened," and that's led to conversations. Actually, is and I think it's just to what you said before. It's that always hiring, always engaging. And again, this becomes, particularly from a founder perspective, your value is going to always be your relationships you have in the network. And people who are clients, like Hannah essentially was a client that turned into a team member. And it's because we'd built a good relationship with someone who was a client. We saw that they were awesome at what they were doing. And it just happened to be opportunistic that then they moved and were going to think about doing a different thing for for work, and we could pick them up. So I think having that view with your clients, your partners, everyone in the network is always a relationship first. They're not just your client. You don't just treat them like their client. You treat them as a person, an individual. And if you build that relationship, you never know where that will go in the future.
100%. And I think on the theme of you, I don't know how to link this together, but another great hire. Oh, fuck, I'm going to go. We are another great hire, Danny. Nadia, if we're going to name names. But again, I think like always be hiring. I think you met Nadia at a party or an industry event and pinged me and said, I think I've met like a future hire here. Like amazing background, amazing skills. Had just moved into the country, like total like star peg in a round hole kind of thing. Not sure where and how she fits in our business, but I'm pretty sure she's someone that can create value if we can find a way to bring her into the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the genesis of that one actually came back to a guy who was doing fractional marketing for us, Gaz. And Gaz is a good like industry kind of networker, and he had these events, and it was a South by Southwest kind of event that there was a bunch of investors from Singapore, and Gaz was like, come along, I'm going to introduce you to a bunch of people. And it was just purely by going to that event that Gaz had kind of coordinated for us, that then you run into someone and have a conversation and be like, oh, like it's like that moment they click and you get the space that we're operating in, and you get unique value around what we're doing that you could absolutely unlock value for our organization. And again, it was one of those ones where like Nadia was a risky hire for us, really. Like we were very bullish and ambitious on where we were at in terms of the opportunities and the growth. And it's, again, this was that fine line between how do you balance what the pipeline is and not hiring too early, but finding people who you can fit in and like the value that you can unlock. And the value she unlocked in the time that she was in the business before we collapsed was huge. And she was literally on the path to just take over all of the product really for the business in terms of thinking through what we're going to do. The view on AI was awesome. So I think all of those hires we made like that were like, it does become a risk, and there's no right answer for that. And I do think there's a word of caution. At the end of the day, we got to the point where we weren't at the level of profitability and had enough money that we were fully sustainable from the bank as well. Yeah. And that was one of the factors that put us into this weird situation that happened for the end of the company. But it was one of those ones where, like, if you're taking investment and there's assumptions that changed along the way, it's like, no, if there's investment that's there, we need to be able to balance this. We're about to launch for growth here. Like, we don't want to just completely delay everything through there. And that was the strategy. It wasn't just cut down to the bare bones and really, really scrape by. Like, we'd shifted into that path to say, no, we need to start adding the people. Like, we added in another person in the customer success team in the analytics space who was, again, on track to become someone who's going to create awesome value for us. Roop, she was awesome with customers, like technically minded, could go and do the heavy lifting in the analytics space, but you could sit her in front of a client, she'd manage a relationship. It was really good. Those people had started to bring in on that journey, but was it too early? Who knows? Maybe it was. Like maybe we ran a slightly too high cost base, but there was a reason. It was a deliberate choice with some funding assumptions and some other things in line there. But that's the game you have to play. I think if you're going to build a business, you got to work out, are you going to take those risks? Are you going to risk getting to growth? But people do it with marketing as well, right? So end up spending a shitload of money into to marketing, trying to get to scalability and try to get to scale, and just hoping that you get to a point of profitability before you burn all your cash. It's a tough game.
Yeah, and strategically, just to round that out, Danny, the decision we made was probably lighter on the marketing kind of investment, like heavier on the resource side, or slightly heavier on the resource side, given that we had a fairly extensive network and a healthy pipeline that had come through networks and things like that. It was more around overinvest in servicing the initial strategic clients that we'd had on board. We don't need to kind of pump and dump into, SEO, SEM, like whatever else it was going to be at that point in time, or events. But yeah, I think ultimately I probably wouldn't change that. The one topic that I didn't actually mention that I think really just encompasses a lot of what we've said is kind of the value of the utility player. And I've definitely got a bit of bias in this space because I would consider myself more of a generalist than a specialist anyway. But I definitely, for us, like especially on anything besides the pure technical, like engineering roles, we generally erred towards the side of the generalists, or at least people that we felt confident could wear multiple hats. And I would happily take that into the next venture as the right approach.
Yeah, I think so. Particularly when you're in that explore what the proposition is kind of space.
Yeah.
Like there's definitely a time and a place for the I've got a hat and it's red and I run fast. That's fine. There's a point in your business you need to get those guys in.
Yeah.
But the generalist starting point, and I think generalist skills do translate reasonably well into some of the founder set. I think within a founding team, you want some deep expertise in certain areas, but you do definitely want some people who are quite flexible in your early business, because running a company, you need to just do so many things, right? And if you're not willing to learn other skills and reach into other areas and say, fuck, I'm going to be a privacy guy now, you need to have that kind of mentality when you're going to run a business. So no, I do think the utility player is important. Maybe before we wrap up, Mike, maybe let's go to then values. And I think there's a few different things here in terms of making sure the team have the right values, but it's also you have a choice when you build a business around what type of values you want to lead with or embed in a company. And this very much, I believe, is the choice of whoever the founding team is, whoever the founders are going to be. Mm-hmm. You can choose to have the ruthless startup culture. We're going to work 24 hours of the day and we're going crazy. Or you can choose other methods where you have more flexibility and empowerment, and there's a whole lot of different ways to lead. But I think, I don't know, generally I think it's fair to say we're more people, and the values we always wanted to instill in the team was something about, no, this isn't just a transactional relationship. We are here for each other and we're trying to create something special together, and we're going to lean into that relationship layer to it all. And I think having that mindset early as a founder in terms of what you want to do is critically important, because you can't flip-flop between different things and say, we're going to be flexible and you can work from where you want, and then be like, what the fuck aren't you in the office and you need to be working later hours. You need to be consistent in that, but you just need to set it in your mind in terms of what path you want to go as a founder with your company, with your team, and what type of team you want to build.
Absolutely. And I think, you've also got to kind of role model the behavior that you want kind of other people to display on your behalf as well, right? I think for you and I, we're building this company. We started the journey as we were having our first, and in my case, second children, but balancing the whole family dynamic as well. So it almost became a bit of an imperative to have flexibility where it was required, but at the same time, you're like, well, hey, that's beneficial for us. We get to kind of set a bit of the tone of this business, but it also then is something that I no doubt we role modeled for others. But then on top of that, the other point around hiring for values, I don't know what the lesson is, what the pure tactic is there on how we did that. I think to your point, the people side, all these relationships we've just spoken about were built first socially, first in other contexts before the hiring came into it, with the exception of Roops, I think, who came in through a genuine application flow. Everything else was built off the back of relationships. Hey, I've got a personal connection with you. Let's now talk about the professional connection we want to kind of build in this business. But I think, then you really there was moments when the team had to really, the all-nighters were required at a point in time. But I think that trust, that culture you build through the personal connection is what gets people to just say, like, of course I'm going to do that, because we very much care about the team and we very much care about the mission of the business and doing a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the people are the hardest thing about building a business. Like making sure you get the people right, making sure you get the values in there, but also I think the implications on what happens to a business and the impact to those people is what will always, well, I think for most people who have the right values in their heart, wear the most on a founder or a founding team. Like the hardest point of Dataco going down the path it went was sitting there and trying to work through what that meant for the people and the hurt that pushed the people in. It was a proper traumatic event where there was a group of people who were going through trauma, and some of those people going through like genuine, like, what am I going to do? Like, I need to think about getting a visa sponsorship, and this could possibly lead to me being kicked out of the country. Like, it was a well-being kind of thing. And the first thing that we did when the company went down this path was think about how do we make sure everyone's okay. Yeah. And it was one of those things where, again, it comes back to the network that you build from a people perspective. What happened was all of the founding guys really just lent on their networks, and we found jobs for everybody, really. It was the straight away, how can we find a role here, a role there? And that was the relentless focus straight away. The very, very close second was the clients and working out what we could do to them to support and feeling like we'd let them down. But the well-being of our own team, it's like the Dataco family, was easily the first thing that we thought about. How do we make sure this is okay?
Yeah, 100%. And they're the things that ultimately you look back on, right? And a shit time and a shit outcome, but I think some other things that you can kind of feel good about and be proud about. So yeah, a nice way to finish it, Danny. But for anyone listening in, thanks for your continued support. Please like and subscribe. If you've got any suggestions, let us know. We've got a few more topics that we'll be looking to cover. We are chatting to a few people who have been through their own failure journeys and looking to bring some other externals onto the show at a point in time over the next month or so. So we look forward to evolving the series in due course. Thanks very much. Have a great day.
See y'all.